I never thought my breaking point would arrive with the smell of burnt espresso and a floor sticky with spilled caramel syrup. But there I was, at 1:47 a.m., sitting like a ghost in the back booth of the cafe I closed every night, wondering if anyone would notice if I simply stopped showing up. And then he walked in. At first, I thought it was just another straggler, the kind who didn't understand that closed signs meant closed. But his eyes, God, those eyes found me before I even moved. And instead of irritation, I felt an odd kind of relief, like the universe was mocking me but also offering me a way out. His name was Daniel. He'd been coming in for weeks, always late, always sitting by the window, reading or pretending to. I'd noticed him. Of course I wasn't blind, but I never let myself linger. Customers were customers, and I was a man who couldn't afford distractions. Not when rent was late. Not when my father hadn't spoken to me in months. Not when the silence of my one-room apartment felt like a punishment. But that night, Daniel didn't sit by the window. He walked straight to me. "You look like hell," he said flatly, sliding into the booth across from me. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." He didn't smile. He just studied me, like I was something he needed to figure out. It was unnerving, but also safe, in a way I hadn't felt in months. "You shouldn't be here," I muttered, running a hand over my face. "We're closed." "I know," he said. "That's why I came." Something in my chest shifted. Uncomfortable, like a wound being touched. I should have told him to leave. I should have locked the door and gone home. But instead, I stayed, staring at him under the humming fluorescent lights, waiting for him to say something else. He didn't. Not right away. He just let the silence stretch until it forced me to fill it. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice cracked in the middle. Daniel leaned forward. "No, you're not." And that was it. Thread snapped. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the way I'd been carrying myself like a half-broken machinite all caught up at once. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know me, but instead, my eyes burned, and I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't see. He did see, of course. And instead of pulling away, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. It was the smallest touch, but it felt like being pulled back to the surface after drowning. "Don't," I whispered, though I didn't pull away. "Don't pretend you care." His jaw tightened. "Who said I was pretending?" That shut me up. The city outside was quiet, almost eerie, the way it gets in the dead of night. Inside, it was just the two of us, a forgotten coffee shop, and the ache of everything I'd been avoiding. Daniel didn't push. He just sat there, thumb brushing against my knuckles like he was reminding me I wasn't invisible. Like he knew the weight of silence better than anyone. And for the first time in a long time, I let someone sit with me in the wreckage. The next night, he came back. This time, I locked the door before he walked in. But when I saw him waiting by the window with that same unreadable expression, I let him in anyway. I told myself it was habit, customer service. But deep down, I knew better. We didn't talk much. He drank his coffee. I mopped the floor. Sometimes he asked questions, small ones, like, "How long have you been working here?" Or, "Do you always close this late?" But mostly, we just existed in the same space. And somehow, that was enough. Until it wasn't. Because one night, after the last chair had been stacked and the machines wiped clean, I found myself leaning against the counter, staring at him like he was more than just a customer. like he was the only person who'd noticed I was falling apart. "Why do you keep coming here?" I asked. My voice was harsher than I meant it to be, like I was daring him to lie. Daniel met my eyes without flinching. "Because you're here." I froze. My chest tightened so hard it hurt, and I had no words, no defense. Just a truth I wasn't ready to face. "You don't even know me," I whispered. He stood then, crossing the room with slow, steady steps. When he stopped in front of me, I could see the faint shadows under his own eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet sadness he carried like a second skin. "Maybe I don't know everything," he said softly, "but I know enough." And then, without asking, without hesitation, he reached up and brushed his hand against my cheek. I didn't move. For a moment, the world was unbearably quiet. Every sound muted, every thought gone. All I could feel was his touch, warm and steady, grounding me in a way nothing else had in months. And I hated how much I needed it. "Daniel," I whispered, voice shaking. This can't." But I didn't finish, because before I could, he leaned in, not to kiss me, not yet, but close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. "Then tell me to leave," he murmured. "Couldn't. I didn't." And in that silence, something inside me shifted, fragile but undeniable. I should have told him no. I should have stepped back, reminded him and myself that this was dangerous, foolish, impossible. But the truth was, I didn't want to. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't carrying everything alone. And once you taste that, it's impossible to let it go. The weeks that followed blurred into something both terrifying and beautiful. Daniel kept showing up, sometimes right before closing, sometimes long after I'd turned the lights off. And we'd sit in that dim cafe as if it belonged to us. He'd listen when I talked really listened. Not the way people do when they're waiting to speak and when I couldn't find words. He let me sit in silence, his presence filling the space where loneliness had lived for so long. But intimacy is never simple. The first time he brushed his fingers against mine deliberately, I froze. The memory of my father's voice, sharp and cold, rushed back like a storm. "Boys don't love boys. Not in this house. Not ever." I pulled my hand back so quickly Daniel flinched, confusion and hurt flickering in his eyes. "I can't," I whispered, hating how my throat closed around the words. "You don't understand." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "Then help me understand." It should have been comforting. Instead, terrified me more. Because if I let him in, really let him in, he'd see the parts of me that weren't pretty, weren't lovable. The parts that had been broken by years of hiding and pretending. Still, Daniel didn't push. He stayed. He was patient in ways no one had ever been with me. But patience has limits. One night, after a particularly brutal shift where a customer screamed at me until I wanted to vanish, Daniel found me sitting on the curb outside the cafe, head in my hands. "I can't do this anymore," I said before he could even speak. "Do what?" "This." I gestured helplessly, meaning all of the job, the loneliness, the fear. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay when I'm not. And I can't." My voice cracked. "I can't keep letting you close when I'm too messed up to give you anything real." Daniel crouched in front of me. I steady. "You think I'm here for some perfect version of you." I couldn't meet his gaze. "Look at me," he said, voice firm. When I finally did, he reached for my hands, pulling them away from my face. "I'm here because you don't have to do this alone. Not anymore. The words broke me open. Tears spilled before I could stop them. And for the first time, I didn't fight it. I let him pull me against his chest. Let myself be held like I wasn't a burden. And maybe that was the moment everything shifted. The hardest part wasn't falling for him. That came quietly, naturally. In the way he remembered how I took my coffee or the way he could make me laugh when I was too tired to smile. The hardest part was believing I deserved it. But Daniel had a way of dismantling every excuse I built. You keep acting like you're not enough. He told me one night as we walked home together. Streetlights casting long shadows on the empty sidewalk. But do you realize what I see when I look at you? Don't. I muttered, embarrassed. Don't make this. I see someone who survives every damn day, even when it feels impossible. I see someone who cares so much it hurts. You think that makes you broken. It makes you stronger than anyone I know. I wanted to argue, but the truth lodged in my throat. So instead, I let him take my hand. And this time, I didn't pull away. Still, the world outside our bubble wasn't kind. My father eventually called, his voice colder than ever, reminding me of everything I'd run from. You're embarrassing us. He spat when I told him the truth. You're not my son anymore. I thought the words would destroy me. But Daniel was there, sitting beside me on the worn couch in my tiny apartment, his arm around me as I shook. He doesn't get to decide who you are, Daniel said, voice fierce. He doesn't get to take that from you. And for once, I believed it. The cafe eventually closed down. New management. New rules. No room for tired baristas like me. First, panicked, terrified of losing the place where everything had begun. But Daniel only smiled, pulling me close. Maybe it's not an ending, he said. Maybe it's a beginning. He was right. We found new rhythms: morning coffee runs instead of late-night shifts. Long walks in the park. Evenings spent cooking in my cramped kitchen. It wasn't always easy. There were nights I still woke up tangled in doubt. Mornings when fear whispered that happiness couldn't last. But Daniel was always there, steady and patient, reminding me that love wasn't about perfection. It was about staying. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on that same curb outside the cafe building, now boarded up and abandoned. Daniel sat beside me, our shoulders brushing, the city humming softly around us. Do you ever think about that night? I asked. He smirked. The night you told me not to pretend I cared. I groaned, burying my face in my hands. God, don't remind me. Daniel laughed, the sound warm and bright. Then he leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. It was the night I knew I wasn't letting you go. I turned, meeting his gaze, and for once, I didn't feel afraid of what he saw. Because this time, I knew I wasn't alone. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't broken beyond repair. I was his. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.